It all started with a knock on my door and a letter from the HOA that made my jaw drop. Apparently, without my knowledge or permission, they had decided to allow other members of the community to use my privately owned storage facility. Just like that. No meeting, no discussion, nothing. I was stunned. I had spent years organizing that space, storing tools, equipment, and some family keepsakes. And now, strangers were walking in and out of it like it was a public locker room. At first, I thought it was a misunderstanding, maybe some mix-up in paperwork. So I reached out to the HOA board, hoping we could sort it out like adults. But instead of helping, they told me it was all within their rights under some obscure bylaw. They said the space was part of the common benefit now, even though I owned the building and paid for it out of pocket. That's when I realized something fishy was going on. The situation got worse. People I'd never met were coming and going at all hours. Boxes piled up, furniture, bikes, random junk. You name it, they dumped it there. My own belongings were shoved to the side, some of it damaged, some of it missing. I tried locking the doors. They changed the locks. I tried putting up signs. They ripped them down. It felt like I was living in a weird reality show where the HOA was the villain. So I decided, if they were going to treat my property like a free-for-all, maybe it was time to play by their rules. Just a little differently. I held an auction. That's right. Every single unclaimed item in that storage unit. Gone. And you won't believe what happened next when the HOA found out. When the HOA got wind of the auction, things exploded. I had barely closed the storage doors when the angry emails and phone calls started rolling in. Some board members were furious, claiming I had no right to sell community property. One even accused me of theft. Theft. On my own land, using my own building, that I pay taxes and insurance on. The same building the HOA decided to give away access to like it was a community clubhouse. The hypocrisy was unreal. But let's back up for a second. This storage facility wasn't just some shed I threw together overnight. I built it 5 years ago on my lot with full permits and city approval. I used it to store tools for my landscaping business, holiday decorations, and some boxes of old memories from my parents' house. It had always been locked and private. No one from the HOA had ever said a word, until recently. That's when a new board took over and everything started to change. They started small. First, they tried to enforce new landscaping rules, telling people what colors their mulch had to be, how short the grass had to stay. Then came the fines for tiny things like leaving a trash bin out too long. And then, suddenly, the claim that my storage facility fell under community accessible structures, buried deep in the fine print of an updated covenant. A covenant that, by the way, I never signed or agreed to. They said a vote had passed months ago, but I never saw a ballot. Neither did half my neighbors. The strange part? The people using my storage weren't even folks I knew. One neighbor told me she saw someone from outside the neighborhood pulling up and hauling stuff inside. It didn't feel like a misunderstanding anymore. It felt like something else entirely. And then I got a letter, certified mail this time, that made it very clear the HOA was not backing down. The certified letter wasn't just a warning. It was a full-on legal threat. The HOA claimed I had violated their rules by disposing of community property without permission. They demanded reimbursement for the items I'd sold and threatened to put a lien on my home if I didn't comply. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just about a storage building anymore. This was a power play, and I wasn't the only one caught in it. A few neighbors started quietly reaching out. One guy, Mike from 2 doors down, said he'd been fined $200 for having non-approved curtains visible from the street. Another neighbor, Jenna, got a notice about repainting her mailbox, even though it matched the rest of the street. Little things, weird rules, strange enforcement, it was all adding up. And all of it started after the new HOA board took control. Some of them didn't even live in the neighborhood full-time, but they had a lot of say in what the rest of us could do. I tried going to the next HOA meeting, hoping to talk it out. But the atmosphere was tense. Every time I brought up the storage issue, they shut me down. One of the board members, a guy named Brent, kept repeating the same line. It's in the revised bylaws. When I asked to see the official vote records, they claimed it was all handled digitally and couldn't be accessed at this time. It felt like they were hiding something. Like maybe this wasn't just a mistake or a policy change, but something deeper. Who had really been using that storage unit? And why was the HOA so desperate to keep control over it? I decided to start documenting everything. Emails, letters, pictures of who came and went from the unit. Something about this whole situation felt off. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I found a note taped to my front door. It wasn't signed. But it said one thing. You're not the only one they've targeted. That note changed everything. I stood there on my porch for a long minute, just staring at it. It wasn't much, just a torn piece of paper with that one line. But it felt heavy. Someone else in the neighborhood had been watching, maybe even going through the same thing. And they wanted me to know I wasn't alone. After that, things started moving fast. I got another letter, this time from a lawyer representing the HOA. They were escalating, talking about breach of contract, community damages, and unauthorized public auction of shared assets. The wording was intense, almost like they were trying to scare me into silence. But it only made me more determined. That night, I drove around the neighborhood and quietly dropped notes in a few trusted neighbors' mailboxes. Simple message: if the HOA has done something to you, reach out. Within a few days, my inbox was full. Over a dozen people replied. They shared stories of sudden fines, ignored complaints, and new rules being passed without votes. One woman, a single mom near the back of the subdivision, said the HOA had tried to block her from installing security cameras for aesthetic reasons. Another said they were forced to remove a swing set because it didn't match the color palette. And then came the real twist. Someone sent me photos. Blurry, taken at night, but clear enough. A group of men unloading what looked like office supplies, folding chairs, and even sealed boxes labeled equipment into my storage facility, weeks before the so-called bylaw was even introduced. They weren't residents. I ran their plates, and sure enough, they were registered to a company, one that, according to public records, was connected to Brent, the HOA board member who kept blocking my questions. Everything started clicking into place. This wasn't just about storage. This was bigger. A misuse of power. Possibly even fraud. And now that I was digging, I could feel the pressure building, because someone clearly didn't want me to find out what was really going on. And then, my security cameras went offline. At first, I thought the cameras had just glitched. Maybe a power surge or a loose wire. But when I checked the app, all 6 feeds were offline at the exact same time, just after 2:13 a.m. That wasn't random. I rushed out to the side of the house where the DVR box was installed, only to find the panel door hanging open and the wires neatly snipped. Not yanked, snipped, clean, precise. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. That's when I realized this wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was sabotage. I called the non-emergency line, filed a report, and gave them everything. The cut cables, the photos I'd been sent, even the license plate numbers. The officer was polite, but I could tell he thought it was just a neighbor. Dispute gone too far. He didn't know how deep it really went. The next day I drove to the county recorder's office to pull official records on my property, just to be sure. I wanted proof that the storage facility was 100% mine, no loopholes. What I found made my stomach drop. 2 weeks before the HOA sent that first letter, a document had been quietly filed, an addendum to the community covenants. It included a clause stating that certain structures deemed beneficial for community use would be considered common access unless specifically opted out in writing. The kicker? My signature was on it, but I never signed anything. I stared at the page, heart pounding. It was my name, all right, but the signature wasn't mine. The style was off, the date was wrong, and my name was misspelled, barely noticeable unless you really looked. Someone had forged it. Someone had filed this document behind my back to justify what they were doing. I took copies, drove straight to the police department, and reported it as forgery. This time, they took it seriously. An investigator was assigned, and within a week, things started unraveling. The company tied to Brent had been quietly storing inventory for a side business, using my building for free, avoiding warehouse costs. A few other board members were in on it too. The community access excuse had just been a cover. The police opened a formal investigation, and Brent resigned suddenly for personal reasons. A special HOA meeting was called, and after everything I showed them, photos, emails, the forged documents, the neighborhood turned. I wasn't the only one who had been pushed around. People were angry, and now they had proof. The board was dissolved, and a temporary committee was put in place. I stared at that photo for a long time. The grainy image of me standing on my porch, holding that first note, sent a chill down my spine. Whoever sent it clearly wanted me to know they were still out there, still watching. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a reminder that maybe I had shaken something bigger than just a shady HOA scheme. After the investigation, a lot changed in the neighborhood. The new HOA committee rolled back most of the rushed rules and started holding real, transparent meetings. Neighbors who had stayed quiet before started speaking up. People shared their own stories, some more bizarre than mine. And for the first time, there was a sense that we were actually working together instead of just getting pushed around. Reinforced my security system, this time with backup power and off-site storage. I never figured out who left that last note, and maybe I never will. But I've accepted that some questions don't get neat answers. What mattered was that the truth came out, and the abuse of power was finally exposed. As for the auction, no one ever officially claimed the items I sold. Some probably weren't even from the neighborhood, just junk used to justify their control over the space. And though I'll admit, hosting that auction was bold, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Don't let people take what's yours just because they think you won't fight back. Whether it's your storage unit, your voice, or your home, stand your ground. Because if you don't, someone else will take it and call it community property. And who knows? Maybe the next story in this neighborhood is already unfolding. I took copies, drove straight to the police department, and reported it as forgery. This time, they took it seriously. An investigator was assigned, and within a week, things started unraveling. The company tied to Brent had been quietly storing inventory for a side business, using my building for free, avoiding warehouse costs. A few other board members were in on it too. The community access excuse had just been a cover. The police opened a formal investigation, and Brent resigned suddenly for personal reasons. A special HOA meeting was called, and after everything I showed them, photos, emails, the forged documents, the neighborhood turned. I wasn't the only one who had been pushed around. People were angry, and now they had proof. The board was dissolved, and a temporary committee was put in place. My storage facility was officially removed from any shared-use claims. I even got a public apology, sort of. But just when I thought it was all over, I got one final letter. No return address, no name, just a photo, taken at night, of me standing at my front door holding that first anonymous note.